So Cindy Reichert, Director of Elections.
Yes.
And a lot of people wonder, what does elections do the other 364 days of the year? And this is just a copy of the list, and there are myriad things in here. There's a huge range. So talk a little bit about what elections does the rest of the year.
Okay. Well, first of all, what we do in this department, absolutely every function is mandated by some kind of law. So we deal with federal laws, state laws, rules, everything is required.
And for clarification too, mandated means you must do it.
We must do it according to the law. So, and the kind of thing like 5 words can mean so much, like shall count absentee ballots. Well, that's 4, but it means a lot because there's so much work involved in that. I guess what you could look at it is elections is like almost like party planning.
Okay.
It's like throwing a wedding for 175,000 people in 124 different locations.
Okay.
We work really closely with our city clerks. Also, they do a lot of the legwork that's on that end, and everything comes together throughout the year to happen on the primary day and election day.
Okay.
So a lot of what we do is just do-ahead planning.
And getting ready for that.
Getting ready for it, yes.
Okay.
Different forms that we have to create. The other thing that happens to us is that laws change. Quite frequently there's little tweaks in the law that might be a better way for us to do things. And even though the law says what we should do, it doesn't always say how we should do it. So there's a great deal of coordination in just deciding how the services should be delivered. And in that we do work not only with our city clerks but also with the 87 counties. We have a county association that we work together on best practices so that when something comes up that we're all going to do, we try to be as consistent as possible throughout the state. I know there's been a lot more attention to that since the 2008 recount, and that's something that we've really focused on here in Anoka County, is making sure that everything that we do in all of our polling locations in Anoka County is done exactly the same.
Okay, so we had an election in November of 2010. Is there anything that's still happening in your office in regard to that election? Any loose ends that are still being tied up? Talk about that.
Absolutely. One of the things we do, after the election, there's the canvass. Then there's a great
Define
deal of
what a canvass is.
A canvass is where the results of the election are actually approved by the board.
Okay.
So, for example, our county board does the county canvass where they kind of review and approve all of the results.
And those results
accept
go to
the results, I should say. Then we send that on to the state canvassing board acts. Now, remember in 2010 we also had a statewide recount in the governor's race, which delayed a lot of the work that we do because we were busy hand counting ballots. So after that was all done and the results were finalized, the state canvassing board met, then we start the process of entering all the information into our computer systems from the rosters. So when
the rosters are the book
right,
when you go to the polling place.
When you arrive at the polling place, the voters sign in either as a registered voter, yes, I am who I am, they sign. That roster is actually an oath that they're signing that says I'm 18, I'm not a felon, I'm not under guardianship, and, just all those basics for being eligible to vote. So they sign that roster. New registrants sign a different roster book, but it's essentially the same thing. After the election, we have to take all of that data and post voter history, which means every one of those books comes back to our office, and we have staff members with wands, electronic wands that
like the scanners at the grocery store.
Like a scanner at the grocery store that reads the barcode next to signatures. So we post all of that history. There's also registration forms that get filled out at the precincts on election day, and those also get entered into our systems. So there's a great deal of data entry.
So it's amazing to me that you have people who are administering one of our most important rights as citizens of the United States, and their training is minuscule, so everything is done on the key is the preparation for that moment so that nothing goes wrong.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the training itself is very thorough. We do rely on judges to come back year after year after year. So we do have some very experienced election judges who've done it for many years. We also have new election judges. So we do try to, modify our training sessions. We have some sessions that are more appropriate for new judges, some just for the supervisors in the precinct, the head election judge, we call them.
Okay.
So we do modify that to really match what they need out of that particular training.
Are you preparing for the 2012 election already?
2012, not as much as 2011. We've got elections this year.
Tell me about that.
We'll be running local elections here in Anoka County. There are still some cities, we have 2 cities, Lino Lakes and Circle Pines, that are on an odd year election cycle for all of their council members. So they'll have their elections. Plus some school districts have odd year elections, and many of the school districts will have referendum questions, although that's not all been decided this year. Generally, the odd year elections are a little less stressful. They're a little quieter than say, a presidential election. But still, the same amount of work goes into that, the same amount of planning. Another thing unique about the 2011 election for us here in Anoka County is that we actually operate the ISD 11 Anoka-Hennepin School District elections by contract.
Okay.
So we actually act in an odd year, not only as the county, performing the county level functions, but we also act as a local government in performing the duties of the school district clerk.
And that uses your expertise and brings in some money to help support the operation.
Yes, there is some revenue, but we do have to put on a little bit different hat.
Right.
In the even years, the city clerks generally hire all the election judges, arrange for the polling places. We do the training, and we have a real, division of duties that we follow in an even year. In the odd year, we are locals, so we're hiring those election judges. We're arranging for all the polling places, and also evaluating election judge performance for the next time. So it's just a little bit different kind of work that we do in the odd year. I really think one of the biggest, and it probably means the most to our voters too, is how absentee ballots are handled. And that was just changed in 2010.
And essentially an absentee ballot can be for someone who either A, is not going to be in their voting district, or chooses not to vote that day. You can still be around, but you can choose to vote absentee. Is that correct?
Well, the reasons, we do still have a reason required for absentee balloting in Minnesota. So we've got if you're ill and can't come, obviously.
Right.
If you're disabled or elderly and it's difficult for you to get to a polling place, that's one reason.
Okay.
Generally, there is a box that most people check that is absent from the precinct. Now, we don't say, why are you absent from the precinct, and does that mean that you're a block away, or are you in Italy? So we don't ask those questions, but we do see that absentee voting generally rises, the numbers rise each year. It's a little cyclical, in the state election year or the presidential election year, numbers are way higher than in a local year. The absentee balloting process has changed a lot. And that was as a result of the 2008 recount, that Frank and Coleman recount.
Okay.
Now, election officials had been advocating for change in how absentee ballots were treated for many years before that. And, even though it was a little painful, the 2008 recount really pointed out some of the flaws in the system that we knew already existed. So it was kind of like, painful, but really good for us, and a really kind of very apparent way to demonstrate to policymakers and citizens that we needed some change in this process.
Okay.
So in 2010, the change was made where we no longer deliver those ballots to the precinct. They're now counted here at a central absentee ballot count precinct, which we have here, in our case, at Anoka County Government Center. We actually hired election judges to help us with that. We were able to start the Saturday prior to the election in processing those, opening them up, doing some of the things that have to be done with those ballots before they're actually included in the count. Results weren't released until after 8 p.m., but the opportunity to process those here.
8 p.m. election day.
8 p.m. election day,
Okay.
yes. the opportunity to process those here in our own office under supervision with folks that were watching what they're doing, we're answering their questions as they're doing it.
Yep.
We had very, very little trouble with our absentee ballots.
Great.
And I think too, another little painful point was that we had another statewide recount in 2010.
Right.
But again, it was a great opportunity to demonstrate that things that needed fixing in the 2008 recount or that came to light then, we dealt with appropriately with the legislature, and then enacted new laws, new processes, and were able to demonstrate again in 2010 with another statewide recount that there were so many fewer problems.
Cindy, tell me a little bit about the registrations from 2010. How many did you have, and are they registrations that occurred on Election Day?
Well, on Election Day, and I've got to look at my figures, there were already 193,000 registered voters in our county.
Okay.
On Election Day, we processed another 12,434.
Wow.
Now, those aren't all new voters.
Okay.
And that's a misconception.
Okay.
A lot of those registrations occur just as an update. You know, I moved to a different house, I need to change my address. Doesn't mean I'm another new registered voter, it just means I've updated my information.
Okay.
Now, we're trying to cut down on that number because there's a lot of data entry. In addition to what happens at the polling place, you know, it takes longer to register at your polling place. You know, we encourage people to do it ahead of time if you know that there's some kind of change, or if you are a new voter, come in ahead of time or do it through the mail to get that taken care of. But if you're doing it on Election Day, it does take more time in the precinct. And then following that, we've got a lot of data entry here to do all of those updates. Okay. Now, one of the things that's new, again, in 2010, that we are now participating in is a program with the U.S. Postal Service with the National Change of Address program.
Oh.
So, for example, if I move from Fridley to Coon Rapids and I notify the post office that this is a permanent change of address, that information is forwarded to us through an electronic file transfer. We then are able to generate a card to the voter saying, hey, we heard you moved, here's your new polling place. If this isn't correct, please call us right away.
Okay.
And 2010 was the first election where we saw that actually occur. And actually the number of registrations did go down. And we're also finding that that electronic process, just in general, has reduced the amount of data entry that we have to do as a county. So not just the Election Day registrations, but the ones that occur throughout the year. We've been able to cut down on our part-time staff in that area. So we've reassigned them to other areas. You know, sometimes when the work goes down in one area, you end up with more in another. And that does happen, but you know, we've been able to cut down on the data entry.
Do you think the future of elections includes more self-service? For example, if I know that my, I'm able to electronically access my bank account, could I electronically access my voting record and update my address myself, those sorts of things, so that there isn't so much work put on as far as the office as here?
I think that that is definitely where the future in elections is. In fact, it's already being done in many states.
Oh, okay.
They have internet registration. People are assigned a password. They can go in and check their record. Now, we've made a little progress in that area here in Minnesota, in that you can now check on the status of your absentee ballot. You can check on your registration status also by going through the Secretary of State's website. Okay. We're still not at a point where you're actually registering over the internet, but we do have a lot of options for that. You can download a form and mail it in. And then that postal verification card gets sent, and that sets off the whole process of doing all the record checking between the different databases that the state already has access to.